Okay. So GAP is a collaborative which includes organizations serving PPA anthropologists in North America and Europe to date. GAP members include the Applied Anthropology Network, or AAN, of the European Association of Social Anthropologists, or EASA, the National Association for the Practice of Anthropology, NAPA, the Washington Association of Professional Anthropologists, WAPA, the Anthropology Career Readiness Network, or ACORN, Anthropology to UX, and Anthropology in Praxis in Canada with the Canadian Anthropology Society, or CASCA. GAP's purpose is to work collectively to identify and bridge the gaps between and among geographic communities of PPA anthropologists, and where there are none, to foster those. Beginning with a focus on North America and Europe, the vision is that GAP will continue to expand its reach to invite other networks to join. Our public-facing work is to host high-quality events that serve the needs of PPA anthropologists. Examples of past events including anthropologists working in political turmoil and anthropologists engaged in anti-trafficking efforts. Recordings of both are available through the GAP website. This event will be recorded and will also be available through the GAP website. Today, we're pleased to host an event called Anthropologists Get That Job, where we will share timely and important information on preparing to look for jobs and successfully applying for jobs. First, we'll have introductions, and then each speaker will share their information. After all speakers have finished, we will have a good discussion period. Please use the chat feature to share your questions, concerns, ideas, and, of course, resources. We'll be monitoring it throughout the session and raising issues for the group to discuss. The formal session will run about 90 minutes. And again, if you're an employer, also share your thoughts and perspectives on the chat. And please start your entry with the word employer in capital letters. We ask that during this session you stay on mute, and if you're comfortable, please stay on camera. Please share your name, as we've said, and your country of origin. I believe that there is no organization that does not need an anthropologist. I think we need to be where people will learn about us and value us, and then bring in people behind us. Hand to hand, we will infect the world with anthropology, and it will be so much better for us. Now, we are still waiting for our European friends to join us. And I was about to turn the session over to Anya. Has Anya joined us? No, Anya has not joined us. So we're going to go off script, and I'm going to push Olivia to the end because Olivia is also in Europe and hasn't appeared. So Matt and Jennifer, if you could each introduce yourselves as professional anthropologists, and then Matt and Jennifer will be talking about resumes and presenting yourselves to employers.
All right, you want to go first, Matt?
No, go for it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Studebaker. I'm here representing the Anthropology Career Readiness Network. But as I put in my name here too, I am also a current employer here in the United States. I'm the executive director at the Women, Food, and Agriculture Network. I will add, I'm not hiring currently, but I have hired recently. So I have looked at a lot of resumes. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt to do his introduction briefly, and then I think we can get more into the content.
So my name is Matt Stouffer. I am a federal contractor in the DC area. Would everyone please mute? And thank you. Like I said, I'm a federal contractor in the DC area. I work in national security spaces, so kind of different experience for most anthropologists. Uh, Jennifer, take it away.
Great. And yeah, I'll add, I'm a business anthropologist that I've moved back and forth between sort of the for-profit and nonprofit sector. But I would say the majority of my experience is in nonprofit. So you'll get some specific tips around that today. Our share, yeah, is really focused around how do you develop a resume. But to develop a good resume, you also kind of need to know yourself. So I do have a few resources I want to drop in the chat that will be helpful in thinking through what do you want to include in your resume. So the first one is a tool that we developed with ACRN around identifying and rating your skills. So this tool is really to help you kind of audit what skills you have and your level of confidence with them. So this will be helpful in kind of narrowing down what do you want to include. And also as you're thinking about careers, what jobs do you want to look for? And because it's going to be really helpful to have a good understanding of your own competencies when you're trying to decide if a job is a good fit for you. Also, with that is a lot of the language that we use in anthropology is unique to anthropology. So we also have a tool that's really focused on how do you translate those skills into language that employers are going to recognize. Now, I'll add too that some of the language has shifted recently too, especially if you are looking at federal jobs. You might want to leave some of the DEI stuff off since there's issues here in the United States around a recognition of that. But this will be helpful in thinking through, okay, I know how to conduct research, but what is that? What's the value of that to an employer? And really being able to articulate the power of problem solving there. And another thing that's important to think about too is like, what kind of job do you want? So using your anthropological reflexivity on yourself to think about what is a good work environment for you based on your skills, your life situation, and recognizing too that you may have different disabilities that you need to accommodate for. That's going to be really helpful in thinking through and targeting specific employers that you want to work with. And one question that we get a lot too is like, okay, I'm trying to find a job, but I don't know what to search for because when you search for anthropologists, a lot of the times you're not going to get a lot of hits. So this is a tool that we put together early on in our work that kind of is a consolidation of practitioners' current jobs. So this is not exhaustive of all the job titles that are out there, but it can maybe get a little kickstart when you're getting ready to start searching on LinkedIn or another job site. And as a part of too that recognizing where you want to try and find a job, I really recommend checking out this webinar series that we did with AAN last year at ACRN. And check out the Exploring Domains of Practice YouTube, because this is going to be really helpful in understanding particular domains of work. Because one of the things I think you'll recognize as we kind of go through our advice is that some of the recommendations and best practices when it comes to writing resumes and or cover letters, it helps to really understand the area of work that you're looking at getting into, because there are going to be variations based on the sector, but also sometimes the size of the employer. So there's a number of different formats that you're going to have when you're applying to jobs. So we're going to focus on advice around resumes, but a lot of you that come from academic backgrounds also probably have a CV. So a CV is the collection of pretty much all of your experience. So it can get pretty lengthy. But when it comes to a resume, you usually want to keep that 1 to 2 pages max. So I've dropped a tool again in here around the differences between resumes, CVs, but also portfolios and bios, because those are also other tools that you may need when you're doing job applications. So coming over to talk about resumes a little more. When you're getting ready to write your resume, our recommendation is to really tailor it to the specific job description that you're applying for. And I'll add too that I know this sounds exhausting, especially if you're somebody that's been putting out hundreds of resumes with not much response back. And I'll say as somebody that's been there and done that, using the easy apply in LinkedIn. I really recommend against that. I think taking the time to be thoughtful and align your resume to really reflect the job description and the skills that they're looking for is going to help you out quite a bit in terms of the returns and the replies that you're going to get. I also recommend you look at where and how you're applying, engaging the level of effort you want to give. So I work in the nonprofit sector, so there are some larger organizations that use systems. I guess ATS systems is probably the best descriptor of it, like Workday, or you can think Bamboo HR. So pretty much whenever you're applying to a job and there's a portal you have to sign into, or you're uploading things, you can probably assume that that's going to be more of an automated process in terms of their job review process or their application review process. However, in a lot of smaller organizations like my own, we only have 3 full-time staff. So when you apply to a job with us, you're going to see an email address that you're emailing your application materials to. So I will add, whenever you see that you're emailing your application materials to either like something like apply or even a person's individual email, you could probably assume that you have a little more leeway in terms of the format of your resume, and that there's probably going to be human eyes on it rather than computer eyes first. So I'll let Matt, when he shares, give you a little more tips around how to deal with the ATS systems. But when you are applying and you know that there's probably going to be a human looking at this, you cannot assume that the human is going to spend a lot of time looking at that. So our first advice is to make sure that your resume is easy to like. That means it's clear. They can quickly see, oh, I get why she applied for this job or he applied for this job. And it hits on the skills and the requirements that are described in the job description. So when you're getting ready to look at a job description, we actually have a tool for that. I'll drop in the chat for you around how to do that sort of analysis. So, you've learned how to do close reading of theory. This is your time to take that, process of close analysis and read through the job description before you even start on your resume. And if there is a cover letter required to, a lot of these recommendations transfer over to that. Now, one thing I will flag though is you want to try and meet the majority of the requirements, but I think it's important to recognize you do not have to always meet all of the requirements. So when you look at a job descriptions, a lot of employers will have sort of basic requirements or the things that are kind of really needed for that job. So if you're applying for a bookkeeping job and you've never done bookkeeping, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to get that job. But if it's a research job where, they just need you to know how to, have certain basic skills, a lot of times they'll also have preferred qualifications. So this is maybe where the list, like, we'd like you to have, be multilingual, but that's maybe not a deal breaker if you can't speak more than one language. All right. And when it comes to putting together a resume, some things to really avoid. First, basic mistakes. Okay. I have had more than one person send me their resume that doesn't have an email address on it. And I think sometimes in people's head, they're like, well, I'm emailing in the resume, so they've got my email, but you can't assume that the person receiving your resume is going to be the last person reviewing your resume or the person reaching out to you. So make it easy for them. You don't want to create roadblocks in terms of them employing you. So make it easy for them to contact you quickly. So making sure you've got your email address and your phone number included. We have moved away, I think, including your full mailing address, since I don't think we have a lot of employers that ask you to receive mail. So I recommend really just putting your city and state when you're applying for jobs now. Just recognizing that, unfortunately, I think discrimination can be a thing, and that's one way to reduce that. Another thing to also avoid is including your photo. So unless it's a modeling job, I really recommend against including photos. I know if you go into Canva and you search resume templates, they're going to give you a bunch of fancy things. I really recommend keeping it as basic as possible in terms of what your how you're formatting your resume. It's really more about the content than how pretty it is. Though I would say definitely make sure to have spacing and have it so it's easy to scan quickly. And keep the most important information up at the top of the page, because if you look at sort of the heat maps from when people look at websites, you can see where people's eyes go. So you want to make it easy for them to quickly scan and pick up that information. And my last note before I hand it back over to Matt, and we're here to answer any questions you've got too, um, is to really use your anthropology skills here in trying to understand your audience. So when you're applying for a job, you want to put yourself in sort of their mindset. You know, what are they looking for? What's important to them? How much time do they have? Because you can't assume that everyone's going to spend, a full hour thoughtfully reading through your application. And my other last note on what to avoid is don't include your thesis. We do not have time for that. Unless they ask for a copy of your dissertation, they generally don't want it. All right, I'll pass it over to Matt.
Thank you, Jennifer. So just want to echo a few things that Jennifer said. Yeah, keep it concise. Leave more white space in the resume than you think you need. You want it to be as digestible as possible. Let's see what else. So Jennifer mentioned the ATS systems, the applicant tracking systems. We think that like 98% of companies are using these in the US. So odds are, if you are not in the initial batch of people applying for a position, your resume will probably not even be seen. So that speaks to being timely when you are submitting a resume. Um, Employers are getting hundreds, maybe thousands of job applications now for each requisition that they put out. So it really does behoove you to be as timely as possible. And uh, to that end, if you are making multiple resumes for different industries or different sectors, make sure that you have those pretty much ready to go so that you can jump on a job requisition when you see one. Let's see. So another thing that Jennifer mentioned, don't be afraid to apply to positions where you don't think that you meet all the qualifications. Uh, my rule of thumb is usually about 80%. If I meet 80% of the qualifications, then I'm okay to apply to that position, because you never know which ones are mandatory. And the worst that they say is no. The worst that they say is no, thank you. So just apply for it. Uh, I would encourage you not to limit yourself when it comes to the jobs that you apply to. Um, Instead of trying to find a specific set of job titles to apply to, start looking at job descriptions, look at the job descriptions, see how you can fit into that job description. Can you meet 80% of these qualifications? If so, and you're interested in that job, go for it. There are many, many, many jobs that anthropologists can do, basically anything involving people. But a lot of times we don't think about that. For example, in the tech sector, I mean, I've worked currently I'm a data scientist, but I've worked in cybersecurity. With cybersecurity, there are roles called an information security systems engineer. That actually is a very good job for an anthropologist because it requires a lot of people skills, but most anthropologists aren't. So start looking at different types of jobs. It may mean that you have to pick up additional skills, additional domain knowledge, but that's what we do. Anthropologists learn. And that's another point to make. When in doubt, do ethnography. Do what you're trained to do. Uh, that's probably our biggest skill set, in my opinion. You can learn a lot about a job, a lot about a job site just by doing what you've been trained to do. Do ethnography. Let's see. So I do the Napa Careers Expo every year, and one of the things that I've come across in the last few years, um, when I tell people that I work in national security spaces, a lot of this has happened a few times. People will tell me that's scary, and they will walk away and never think about it. The truth is that we need to be in scary places, because when we're not there, and not receiving our perspectives, they get scarier. So don't be afraid of the scary places. Embrace it. And it's not just government, it's not just national security. Look into AI jobs, look into the places where anthropologists can do the most good. Another incident. I was at a talk where someone who had written a book about their career mentioned that their career was more of a careen. Don't do that. Have some strategy. Don't fall from job to job. Uh, Make a plan. You don't necessarily have to stick to the plan. I haven't stuck with my plan. That's okay, but have a direction to go. Be discoverable. Make sure that places like LinkedIn, you have a full profile on LinkedIn. Make sure that um, people can people can find you. In my opinion, that's the better position to be in. Recruiters can contact you because you fit the skills that they're looking for, rather than you trying to knock on their door. Let's see. Uh, if you can, try to create a small pool. Try to create a limited space that you are uniquely qualified for. For example, I've done that through getting security clearances. Only a small number of people have the security clearances that I do, so it makes me more attractive to employers. I get recruiting contacts pretty much every day because I have the clearances and the technical skills to back it up. So yeah, try to create a small pool that is only available to you and maybe a small number of people. It also gives you a lot of negotiating power later on. Let's see. Sorry, just looking at my notes. I think that's all from my end.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the
thank you.
other thing I'll toss in too is when you are looking for jobs, it's best if you're a warm applicant. So that means that you have done some work connecting with that organization so that when your name pops up, you're not a stranger. So the way you do this is by networking. So I'm going to drop another tool in the chat there around how you do informational interviews. So when you are looking for jobs, honestly, your massive your big job aggregators are kind of like the last place I would start in looking for jobs. Where you want to look first is, you can find jobs on LinkedIn. I actually found my current job on LinkedIn, but it wasn't a posted job on LinkedIn. It was someone's post in my feed where they were looking for an employer with the link off to a different website. So that's where I would start. And looking for jobs is following people who are working in the sector that you're interested in getting into. And then also, if someone's got kind of your dream job, maybe reach out to them for a short informational interview to understand how they got there. And they can help you answer some questions around, how do you stand out? What skills are really needed in this area? And, ideally, if they're hiring in that organization, then they can also be a referral so that your resume will get looked at. Because a lot of times in these big ATS systems, if you've got somebody watching for your resume to come through, that's really important. I'll also add there's certain job posts on LinkedIn where you can reach out to the employer too. So just asking like a little question to clarify is always a good way to kind of make it so that when they see your name come through, that you might be able to break out of the crowd. But yeah, networking I would really flag as like one of the most important tools in finding a job, especially one that you want for anthropologists.
And just to add to the networking discussion, uh, just be aware that networking does not happen overnight. It's an investment in time. Uh, Make sure, like, if you want a job in 6 months, start networking now. It does take time for those networks to build and for them to bear fruit.
Yeah, and the payoff may be years down the road. Like I had one job I got where a recruiter reached out to me, where I had worked with her on, applying to stuff like 2 years before and found a different job and didn't need her anymore. And she followed back up with me when she saw I was looking for work. So yeah, just recognize it's not always an immediate reward. And this is something that you're going to be doing over the course of your career. It's not something you're one and done. Always think about how you can build those relationships.
Matt and Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing what you've shared. I hope that I'll actually put a link in the chat for the the career readiness is book that is targeted at students and early career and changing careers for anthropologists as well. So I think that's such a great book, and has some great tools in it, and you can get it for fairly inexpensively. And do you know if it can be, can you get it in Europe? Do you know, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think it varies country to country. We did choose to
Okay.
publish through Amazon because it had sort of the widest distribution. It is $10 in the US. Unfortunately, we cannot control how Amazon chooses to price things, so I'll
Mhm.
apologize if it is coming through a little higher, depending on where you're at.
I think it's maybe 15 or 20 in Canada, and it's a great tool for anyone looking for, even like a workbook style to be working through this kind of information. We're going to take a couple questions immediately about resumes, if you don't mind, as we sort of restructure the agenda to a little bit today. So I'm wondering if there's any comments or questions from anyone about what you've just heard about resume building, applying for jobs, working with these ATSs.
And you're free to come off of mute. Charlie Hodges from Canada.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm recently graduated with my bachelor's, so I'm very entry level. Um, and I do feel like I've got a solid CV with my volunteer stuff and like all of the stuff I did throughout my bachelor's degree, but I don't have any anthropology work experience yet. I mean, I work as a receptionist and I did serving and retail and stuff, so I feel like it's hard to have a solid resume going into entry level positions. Do you have any advice?
Well, I'll start by saying you do have experience, it's just not specifically anthropological research. But I would say the skills that you learned and used as a receptionist in service work can translate over into like anthropology research. And a lot of times, I'll say um, customer service, having those skills is really valuable and knowing how to work and interact with people. So I think you can combine that service work with your anthropology education to emphasize that you know how to speak to people of different backgrounds and communicate complex ideas. I think that's where I would start in bringing your work experience together.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just to echo that, those interpersonal skills are are again very important in really any kind of work that you might be going into. Um, if we're talking about technical work, something like a Scrum Master or something, some kind of coordination type of role, those interpersonal skills are very useful.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
people who can work with people are valuable.
And rare.
Full
Also add
stop.
bonus points if you can write clearly.
Julie in the
True.
US.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, okay. I have my little thingy on. Hello. Yeah, I guess similar, maybe kind of expanding on that, talking about varied experience that's not necessarily anthropological. I graduated with my master's in anthro in 2023, but then I've had I mean, not weird jobs, but jobs that just have nothing to do with anthropology since then, just because of money and health issues and all sorts of stuff. And now I'm trying to do a more targeted search towards anthropology jobs. So I guess I'm wondering, like, how do I, like, maybe how would I structure my resume if the like titles don't seem to have anything to do with the roles I'm
So
applying for?
I've never actually held the title of anthropologist in any role that I've ever been in. I've worked in banking, I've worked in cybersecurity, I've worked in data science, I've worked in anti-money laundering, threat finance. Never have I held the title of anthropologist, and that's okay. It's more important that you figure out the directions that you want to go into. What sectors are you looking at? What kind of work? What flavor of work are you trying to get into? And then how can you bring anthropology into that? Yeah, in my opinion, it's always better to to do anthropology instead of being an anthropologist. Doing anthropology, treating it as a skill set allows you to group it with other kinds of skill sets and define the career that you really want. And that's kind of what I meant about being strategic. Figure out where you want to go, the kinds of things that you want to do.
Yeah, I'll add like none of the jobs I have ever done, with maybe one exception, were exclusively research jobs. Most of the jobs that I've gotten have been much more administrative coordination type jobs where I've managed to talk them into letting me do research. And or there's jobs where it's kind of integrated, but it's not the only skill you have. Like in a resume workshop at SFA last week, I passed out the job description that I had just recently hired for to as like a tool for people to look at when analyzing a job description, and somebody commented like, this is like 3 or 5 different jobs. And I'm like, welcome to the nonprofit workplace where, yeah, you might get to do research 1/10 of the time, but the rest of the time you're doing a lot of different things. So I think as you're trying to like switch sectors and get into a new space, yeah, look at your current experience and what can translate over. When you're also developing a resume, it's important to remember you don't have to include every job you've ever had unless it's a federal resume. Um, so you can pick and choose what you're going to include there, that's most relevant to that job. It's usually good to include at least your like, I would say like 3 most recent jobs. But then after that, like, when I apply to jobs now, I don't include that I was, preschool teaching assistant in God's Bright Treasures in Bright, Indiana in like, 2007. Like that's no longer relevant for me. But if I were going to try to apply to a job that involved early childhood education, that might be something that'd be relevant to include. So I think it's thinking about how do you reflect how you match that job rather than, just, hey, here's me, everything, figure it out. It's really about how do you pair it up.
And again, just a foot stomp that you want to tailor your resume to at least to the sector as much as you can. For example, like I said, I worked in banking and I've also worked in intelligence kind of roles, where banking would call open source intelligence enhanced due diligence. They use different kinds of jargon. So make sure, I mean, I can do both, but make sure that you're using the correct jargon for the correct industry, and make sure that you're connecting those skills. How did you use that skill? That those are really important points.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Kathleen, do you want us to move on then to the next speaker? I see Olivia is here now.
I have a quick comment as
Okay.
I'm an employer. I'm an anthropologist and I employ both anthropologists and non-anthropologists. That's how we think of them. A very important thing for you to do is look at and I'm emphasizing what's been said, look at what you've done and translate it for me. Don't expect as an employer that I'm going to sort through how customer service relates to the skills that I'm looking for. Make it easy for me. Simple, straightforward English and translate it. And you can even do a 1-for-1. There are ways of matching your skills to what I'm looking for. But make sure that I get it quickly. Because if you're one of 100, you want to be one of 5 when I've gone through all of the resumes. So, yes.
Hi.
Nani?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So hi, Olivia. We moved the agenda around just slightly. So Olivia, maybe you could introduce yourself, and I know that you're going to be talking about career paths. And so introduce yourselves, the organization you're representing, and then we'll give you 10 to 15 minutes just to share what you had planned to share with us today.
Can I
And we'll
actually
continue
suggest
questions.
something?
Yeah.
Because I think because of the mix-up, quite a few people, at least from Central European time, will join us in 10 minutes. So I feel like this
Okay.
needs to be more the US, Northern America people. So what if we maybe continue the discussion for 10 more minutes, and then I can discuss when everyone is here, if everyone has time and is open to that. I think that would be nice. So at least they also get some input. I think it would be a shame if they join and then a lot of people don't get anything. more than sorry about this, look at the recording. I think this, what do we think about that?
What
We
we,
act,
go
I'm
ahead.
just going to say we had a question that just wanted to make sure from Samiha Bardhan about using quantitative skills. Is there anything anybody wanted to add on that? I know that Matt replied in the message, but the question was, as a cultural anthropologist, my training has mostly been in qualitative methods. So how important is it to develop quantitative skills such as computing languages like Python or R for the job market? So is there any addition anybody wanted to make besides it can't hurt, which is what Matt said?
Yeah, I think Matt and I can both answer to that a little more. Yeah, I would say it really depends on the jobs that you want. If quantitative skills are involved, and I'll add as somebody who's worked in market research doing survey work. It's sometimes in workplaces there's a division of labor. So like when I worked at Service Management Group, which is a big market research firm, each team had an account manager that's managing the relationship with the client, an account analyst that's doing a lot of the back end grunt work in terms of managing the customer service. And then we had a research analyst that was actually doing the calculations. So I was in the account analyst role where my job was primarily making PowerPoints look pretty and answering angry phone calls from franchisees that think people are trying to get too many free rolls. So I would add too is like it may not be required in all jobs, but I'll also add as somebody who does use some numbers in my research presentations is most of the numbers I include are percentages. They are literally just frequencies. They're pretty easy to calculate. If I'm going to get fancy, I'm going to maybe do a crosstab. And if I can't remember how to do it, I'm going to Google that. So I would say you can teach yourself and remind yourself how to do certain things. But if you are looking at trying to get into more I would say like data science heavy jobs, then yeah, you might want to look at learning Python or R.
Okay, and we actually have two people with their hands up now. I'm not sure who was first. Jimena is the one that I saw first, but so
It
Jimena
was
in Palo.
Navneet. She's been raising
Pardon?
her hand for a bit.
Yeah,
Navneet
that's
has
right.
had a question for a
Navneet,
while.
okay, it didn't show up on mine, so that's fine. Go ahead, Navneet.
Hi everyone. My name is Navneet. I am a social anthropologist and I have a PhD in anthropology. So I basically have a research experience as a qualitative anthropologist. So currently I'm trying to apply for like Government of Canada jobs, particularly like policy analyst or like jobs in which there are requirements like intervention worker for children. So, but I haven't had any success. So I was wondering, like, what should I do?
So I can't speak to the Canadian context, but I know that in the United States, uh, they are expecting what's called a federal resume. Uh, in the US, we use a job portal called what is it?
USA Jobs.
usajobs.gov. Yeah,
Yeah.
usajobs.gov. It is imperative if you were using usajobs.gov that you use a federal resume because otherwise you will never make it through the ATS system. Now, I don't know if the Canadian context is the same, but you might check into that. If you're trying to use a CV or if you were trying to use a standard resume, that may not be making it through the ATS just because Canada may have a similar requirement to the US. Now with USA Jobs,
Mhm.
there is there's a wizard basically on the site that you can use to convert a standard resume into a federal resume. And I strongly suggest that anyone trying to apply using that using USA Jobs use that feature. It makes it very simple to convert your resume. And again, when I did that, I was not getting any traction within USA Jobs with just a standard resume, but when I made that change, I started getting referrals for every job that I applied to. So again, I can't speak to the Canadian context, but if it's anything similar to the US, that may be what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll also add this is where networking can come in. If you're feeling like you're not breaking through, I think maybe try and find somebody that's working in the space that you're interested in getting into. And honestly, if they're willing to, have take a look at your resume, so they can let you know if there's any big gaps in terms of skills or how you're presenting yourself. And also, it probably depends on if you can tell who the hiring manager is. But yeah, you can start working on building some relationships so that when you are applying, they are looking for you first. I think that's going to be helpful in breaking through.
Okay. Yeah.
I know it can be kind of hard at like the government scale, especially if you're not physically located in the same space. But yeah, maybe see it too if you're looking at sort of the federal government, this might be harder, but if you're looking at local or state government, you could also see if there's potential events you could go to maybe schmooze a little, as we say.
Yeah.
So, rub elbows, get to know the folks around there. I was going to say, Natalie, since you are in Canada, do you have any familiarity with their resume?
I was just actually putting a comment in.
Okay.
I have not applied directly for a federal job, but I was approached by a consulting firm to apply for a job. For that job, though, I had to go and get a certain level of security confirmed first. And then once I had that level of security, I could go forward with the process. And the resume was quite detailed. And then the next level of resume would have been more detailed, but the contract got canceled. So it didn't go past that. And when maybe Kat has an opportunity to speak, she might have some additional insight on that. So my advice would be to be searching that Google, how to get a federal job in Canada.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I didn't have the idea of a federal resume, so I'll definitely look into it. Thanks a lot.
In Canada, like in the US, there will be resources for training people who want to apply for jobs. So if you go on, Jobs Canada or what the analogous site is, they will have materials that should be able to help you to get into the process and do it well.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
We do have one more person with their hand up for quite a while, but I just wanted to say something quickly. There's a lot of really good information in the chat, including what Matt just put up about how to get the USA Wizard. So please do remember to save the chat at the end of this meeting so that you'll have all that information on your computer. Jimena, do you still have a question?
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jimena. I'm a graduate anthropologist from Peru. Currently, I'm applying to master programs in Europe. And well, I wanted to participate about the quantitative experience and the skills, how to acquire it. Hi. And well, to begin with, it is a little bit challenging if you don't have this former background in quantitative skills. My first internship was on a AI lab research. So that was the first time. I believe that I was the quota there because most of the people were interns from economics, political science, and I was more specialized in qualitative skills. And right now, 4 years has passed by, and I still keep this firm belief that even though that as anthropologists, we have to learn how to handle not only qualitative skills, but also quantitative, since it is the major force in this market. It is given more emphasis on data science or to quantify the most variable. I still believe that quantitative research relies most in qualitative insights because we have, as an anthropologist, tools that this make us to discover layers in an answer. For example, when we were asked about the perception of corruption in a community, in a quantitative survey, you can have yes, no, and so on. But in a qualitative research, you have layers to that. It's yes, but this happens. No, but this extent. And so it is really rich how you can get to combine and also at the end present yourself not only as an anthropologist but also as a mixed method researcher. So I already saw this a little ethnographic of the current labor market. That is what is the most attractive profile. So that could be something for the rest of the anthropologist peers here to encourage them. And also, it has to be really important for them to come off as natural, these quantitative skills, and learn throughout the process. And another question that I have is that I am currently checking job offers, and one of them are for the United Nations. So this is my first time applying. I really don't know how is the process, how rigid or it is the process. What do they qualify for this? I would like if you can help me guide in this process. That would be really great. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't have any experience with the UN, so I'm not sure how I might be able to guide you with that. Although I did want to mention, just to extrapolate on your earlier point, um, quantitative is kind of held with a bit of privilege, I think, in most contexts. Uh, as a data scientist, I can tell you that quantitative can tell you the what, who, where, and when, but it cannot tell you the how or the why. And that is where anthropology and qualitative comes in. So having a mixed method skill set allows you to do both and to move between them seamlessly. So that is a very useful skill.
May I just step in for a second as convener? Europe is joining us. With apologies to everyone, there was a time zone issue, and we are currently all experiencing it. We will make sure that everyone has access to all of the information from this event. It will be on GAP's website, but we will also be taking questions throughout the time, and we will extend the time for those who can stay in order to ask additional questions. So what we've been doing is we've been moving the agenda around behind the scenes and doing things a little differently than we had planned. So if it doesn't look absolutely seamless, that's why. But we want to make sure that you get full value for everything that we wanted to bring to you today. So people will continue to join us, and we will continue this message, but I'll put it in the chat. So let's go back to the questions, and we're going to take a few more questions on resume building. And let me just vamp and say, as an employer, if you have qualitative and quantitative skills, you've brought extra value to me as an employer. Even if I don't need that today, I will recognize that that could be valuable down the road. On the UN, it is, as you probably would guess, extraordinarily competitive. And there are two things that I would do, and we've worked with the World Health Organization. So some experience. First of all, network like crazy. Find people inside the organization that you're interested in working with and make your case to them. The second thing you can do is go through governmental resources in your country. So if it's a health issue, you find the people who are doing international health, who will interface with the United Nations. If it's environmental, again, who will interface with the United Nations and try using that as an official pathway, an official networking pathway. That's very potent if you can get someone like that to make connections for you.
Thank you so much.
So Natalie, back to you. Are there more questions? And if not, then we can ask Olivia to go forward.
Okay, Olivia, you're on deck. If you could
One more
introduce
time and
yourself
just
yeah.
I would love to. I was also in touch with Jennifer, who said she would be open to also give maybe a little bit like the input again, because the majority of people has joined us now of the official time of the event. So maybe we can try, because she said she has time to do it, and I think it would be nice for the discussion. So if that's okay with everyone. Of course, those that came early might hear some repeated things, but I think, like I said, for a lot of the participants could be nice. So Jennifer, if it's okay with you, to maybe just
I was wondering if
share
Olivia,
some
we have
information
you
were
go
planning to share.
first. I was going to say maybe if you go first,
Yeah.
and then those that joined like early can drop off when we
Sure.
circle back to us, if that makes sense.
No problem. Let's do that. And let me just share my screen. There we go. Okay. Can you see my screen? See some nodding. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia. I am a social anthropologist and project manager from Vienna, Austria, and I'm also the coordinator of the Career Paths Initiative at the Applied Anthropology Network. The Applied Anthropology Network is a network with the aim to highlight what anthropologists do outside of academia, as well as how you can apply anthropological thinking and methods in different kinds of industries to create impact. And we also, a big focus of ours is also to connect different people within anthropology or that have an anthropology background, as well as anyone from different industries to kind of share what we can do and the skills that we have. Today, I will talk a bit about the systemic challenges that recent anthropology graduates might face in Europe and beyond, before sharing some learnings from our mentors and mentees from the mentorship program that we have at AAN, and end with a few tips and ideas for building your own support system. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the systemic nature of some of the challenges that we are struggling with as recent graduates, because often struggling feels like a personal failure. But often it is a broader phenomenon that many are affected by and that you often don't really have any control over to a certain extent either. So let's say, for example, what if you want to go the typical traditional academic route? There has been a big increase in university graduates over the recent decades because many more people are able to study nowadays than even just 10, 20 years ago. So that has created a big bottleneck in the academic job market. Giving one example from the Netherlands, there are around 1,000 people that graduate from anthropology degrees every year, while there are only around 10 paid PhD positions available in the entire country per year. That means that only 1% of anthropology graduates can actually remain in academia right after graduating. So while we all get trained to become academics, not everyone can become one, even if we wanted to. And if you look outside of academia, there's quite a similar trend to this. Over the last 2 decades, the supply of university graduates has consistently outpaced the demand for graduate labor. So what this means that in the decade, at least that this data is focused on, is in the decade between 2005 and 2015, the amount of university-educated people, so people with university degrees, in the labor force in Europe increased in every single European country by an average of 32% or 8 percentage points. So, but of course, this also fluctuates per country. So in some, this was even higher. For example, in Poland, it went from around 17% of the labor force having a university degree in 2005 to almost doubling to 30% by 2015. And since then, this trend has just continued and is even expected to exceed 40% of the labor force having university degrees in Europe by 2030. On the other hand, though, the increase of graduate jobs or highly skilled jobs wasn't as universal. The average in the EU of the increase of graduate jobs was 7% in the same amount of time, so 2005 to 2015. But there was also a big fluctuation between countries, and there were some where it barely changed or even decreased, for example, in Greece, Slovakia, and Italy. So what this means is that the demand for graduate labor is not the same across Europe, while there is a growing amount of graduates looking for jobs everywhere. So this means the graduates' prospects are often increasingly dependent on where they're based and their national and regional economy. And so a lot of people decide or even feel like they have to leave their countries for better opportunities and thus also increasingly compete with nationals for the same job. But this doesn't mean that people are unemployed, because overall, in the EU, university graduates have quite high employment. In 2024, for example, it was around 83%, which is quite high. But again, this differs widely by country as well. So, for example, it ranged from slightly under 70% in Italy to over 90% in the Netherlands. And there's also a stark difference between disciplines. If we take the example of Austria, about 76% of education graduates or teaching graduates and 84% of IT graduates are employed 3 years after graduation. Comparatively to the social sciences, there's only 55% that are employed after that time. But still, only 2% are officially unemployed, because a whole 30% of social science graduates of Austrian universities have actually moved to other countries. So their status is unknown. But only 8 to 9% of the other two disciplines have left the country. So how many jobs are available and for whom and where makes a big difference. But most people are still employed. So the question is, what kind of jobs are they working in? According to the Eurograduate Survey from 2023, over half of all master graduates in the EU have stated that a lower degree would also be sufficient for the job that they currently have. And 30% have said that they do not work in a field that they studied in. So that's almost 1/3. So there's a bit of this seeming contradiction of higher degrees or having a university degrees become worth less than just 10 years ago as more people have them, but comparatively fewer jobs available that actually need them. But at the same time, they become more important because not having one can then quickly disqualify you in the application process if all other candidates have one. And so part of the issue is the lack of relevant jobs in certain places or certain industries. But many that start to apply to non-academic jobs might also find it difficult to even explain what you bring to the table, or even find those relevant jobs in the first place. So, and this is one of the biggest challenges that graduates face. Many of us entered anthropology because we were fascinated by culture, society, what it means to be human, and universities generally do a good job as teaching us to think like anthropologists, to ask critical questions, to understand the world from multiple perspectives. But the problem is that's often where they stop. They teach us what to think, but not how to use that thinking outside of an academic context. So what's missing from our training? First, the ability to connect theory and knowledge we create to real-world problem solving. We learn a lot about concepts and theory and methods, but rarely practice applying them to actual challenges that communities, organizations, businesses are facing. Second, they don't really demonstrate the different industries and jobs in which anthropologists work. It can be nonprofits, the government, businesses, pretty much anything. So most of us finish our degrees without ever seeing what a practicing anthropologist actually does day to day if they're not an academic. And third, just basic career skills, how to translate your research into actionable insights, how to network, how to talk about your skills to someone who's never even heard of anthropology. And this is all what falls under kind of like the umbrella of career readiness. It's about using what we've learned and building on it to put it to work in the real world, let's say. But often teachers do not really have any non-academic experience themselves. And in some departments, the stigma around working in other industries is even still very present. So there is a hesitancy sometimes to include more guidance and applied approaches and career readiness in the curriculums, even if the awareness is there. And so I know all of this sounds very dreary, but it doesn't mean everyone will struggle finding a job or only work in unrelated positions or ones they're overqualified for the whole life. It's just a reminder that there are systemic changes and challenges that affect us all and that everyone is trying to understand and learn how to navigate. So it's not your fault or failure if you're struggling. And also there's ways to get support for this. I joined AAN right before I was graduating from my master's, and I didn't really know what opportunities there were out there for me. And coming out of this anthropology bubble at university, after so many years, I really felt like I had no relevant skills to begin with. So as part of me joining the network and conversations I was having at the time, I initiated the mentorship program because I really wished something like this existed. The program itself aims to support students, recent graduates, or pretty much anyone who wants to transition out of academia and take the next step in their professional paths towards a career in applied anthropology. We match our mentees with one of our amazing mentors from all different kinds of industries, including policy, design, development, you name it. And then these pairs work together for 3 months and meet one-on-one to discuss the mentees' journeys, questions, and any steps forward. And the program is completely free, it's remote and open globally. We have 2 cohorts per year, so one in the summer, one in the fall. And next week, we're actually starting a 5th cohort of the program, and we'll overall have had 68 mentees, and currently we have a pool of around 30 mentors from all over the world. So I want to share some learnings from the last cohort that we have, and that I think would be really helpful for everyone to keep in mind. So the first one is, your path will not be linear, and that's okay. So that's one of the most important lessons I feel like from our program that mentees often share with us, is that careers of anthropologists rarely follow a straight line. Many of our mentees come in expecting to find, or hoping to find, let's say maybe, to find a clear step-by-step guide or roadmap to graduating, to getting a full-time job that they can have for the rest of their lives. But what mentors more often point out or share with them is that the journey is very often full of detours, iterative, and a bit unexpected, but that's part of the process as well. The goal is not necessarily to have the perfect 5-year plan, but to stay curious, try different things, and that might lead you to opportunities that you could have never really planned for. Second, your first job after graduating is not your final destination, because many graduates put immense pressure on themselves to find the perfect, most relevant role immediately. But it's important to remember that the first job right after university is more often than not a stepping stone, not a definitive life decision. Also, there are other realistic considerations to keep in mind. For example, just needing to make money to pay your rent. So if the job doesn't feel super relevant or exactly what you want, if it gives you experience, if it teaches you skills, and if it lets you pay your bills, that's great. You have time to try things out and see what sticks, because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And third, you have more experience than you think. Many graduates leave academia feeling like their past work, thesis, fieldwork, or any other university projects they might have done in the last few years are completely irrelevant to the real world. However, the skill is also in learning how to translate that work. Like, your thesis doesn't just have to be a very long document gathering digital dust on your laptop, but it's proof that you can design a project, manage roadblocks, build trust with people, synthesize information into insights. So it's about learning to explain that and tell that story. You can even produce a small report or make a presentation for a local organization, local government, or company that is working on or potentially interested in your topic. It's great practice in making information digestible, accessible, and relevant to a particular audience. And it's also a win-win, because they learn more about something that's relevant to them for free, and you get to gain new skills, use it for your portfolio maybe, and maybe even create new opportunities. So, but what are some other ways to get support? First, and you probably don't want to hear this anymore, I know, is networking. Yes, it can be joining professional communities like organizations like AAN, NAPA, EPIC, or attending events online or in person. But most forget about one of the most important communities and support networks that you already have, which is alumni from your program and fellow students. They understand your situation because they've been there or they are currently in the same boat. Plus, today's classmates can be tomorrow's professional network in just a few years. So reach out, stay in touch, support each other, and share opportunities. Second, informational interviews. Have conversations with practitioners, ideally in your local area or in the industry you're curious about. Not to ask for a job, but just to learn. What does a typical day look like? What skills matter most? What did they wish they'd known when they were starting out? But before you message, do your research. Know what they do, ask informed questions, so nothing that you can find already on their LinkedIn or their website, because it shows respect for their time and also makes the conversation just generally more useful to the both of you. And honestly, don't be scared. The worst thing they can say is no, and you might be surprised how willing people are to help. And third, volunteer work or projects. Apart from using your previous thesis or fieldwork experience, you can also reframe volunteering experiences or start a new project as a way to practice, build your network, and create something for your portfolio or CV. You could pitch a small, manageable project to an organization that works on a topic you care about, for example, trying to answer a question or a challenge that they have. Or honestly, even make up, a made-up project that still lets you practice some of those skills and tools that you might want to use in jobs that you're looking for. But working with organizations can often be a great starting point, because non-paid experiences, if you're able and have the capacity to do them, are not only easier to get, because small organizations don't really have big budgets or are happy to collaborate more often than not, but it can also be really more valuable than paid ones, because you get to have so much more responsibility and decide on the trajectory of your project much more than if you're maybe in an entry-level role somewhere. So yes, the situation is challenging, and unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. No one can give you all the answers or tell you step-by-step what to do, but you can find allies, mentors, and a network that can support you. You're not alone. There are people out there that help you along your journey, and walking with others makes all the difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olivia. What a great amount of information that you've shared with everyone. We are going to move to Kat now, and then we'll extend the discussion after. And then, as we discussed, Jennifer can share some of what she shared earlier. So, those that joined us after. So, thank you. So, Kat, if you can introduce yourself, we've brought Kat to the conversation today because she just recently changed careers. And so, we've heard about resume building, we've heard about career paths, how to support yourself through this journey. And Kat is going to give us some real life. Yeah, Kathleen?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in as convener again and let everybody know who is coming in, that due to a time zone issue, we're going to come back around and talk about resumes and applying for jobs at the end. We'll also have time for questions. So we're going to kind of cycle through the front end twice. So don't be concerned if you did not hear some of the content. Thanks.
Awesome. Should I take it away?
It
Well, it's been
sounds
really
it.
great
Yeah.
to. Oh, can you hear me okay? My sound is okay. Cool. Yeah, it's been really awesome hearing everything so far and getting all of the resources in the chat. So my name is Kat Hutton. I like to say that I'm an applied anthropologist. I'm working currently at the Canada Digital Service in the federal government of Canada. Um, I have my master's in medical anthropology. I graduated in 2019. And I've previously conducted research in the private sector for companies like Meta, Microsoft AI, 7-Eleven. Um, so coming from the private sector into public was a big transition for me. I don't have a background in public policy or even a business background for that matter. So even transitioning from academia into the private sector was a challenge. Just coming from medical anthropology and contracts with like small, like a healthcare company that I worked for as an anthropologist, we did a quantitative study. So, sorry, I'm just going to remove the spotlight. It's kind of distracting for me. I don't know if it's automatic, but I'll just leave it like this if that's okay. Yeah, so I can touch on some of the things that Jennifer was speaking to and what Matt was speaking to earlier. I was taking some notes. One of the things that stuck out to me was reflexivity, kind of harnessing your anthropological skills um, to find the job that works for you. And I think that it's kind of funny. It's like maybe a little ironic that as anthropologists, we're trained to understand people, understand new environments and new contexts. And we can use that to our advantage, even if you don't have a business background like I didn't. I kind of approached it anthropologically, just kind of getting FOMO, going on to LinkedIn, seeing all of these people saying that they graduated from a master's in anthropology like me, and now they're working in tech or they're working as project managers or for a nonprofit. I thought that was just really cool and just kept wondering, like, how did they get here? What was their journey? And doing exactly what Olivia was saying with informational interviews, reaching out to those people whose jobs you think are pretty cool on LinkedIn and just saying, hey, I found you on LinkedIn. I have a similar academic background to you. Is there anything I should know about making this leap into the industry? Like, would you want to have a virtual coffee chat with me? And I found it very welcoming, weirdly. I didn't know anything about LinkedIn really. I was like, this is a social media site for getting jobs, and people are strangely warm and welcoming. For me, looking at this world of business people, I didn't expect that for some reason, but it's fairly normalized for senior professionals or just other professionals to give you a bit of a, not a leg up necessarily, but like kind of a welcome into the industry and explain what their journey was like and give you tips. That really helped me a lot. Which brings me to my other point from earlier, what what can you avoid, like, or how to avoid kind of time-consuming mistakes when you're entering the workforce or joining jobs? I think for starters, listening is really important. So don't just do the informational interviews, but do listen and write down if people are trying to give you a hint. You really need to take that hint and kind of like don't take it too personally. But if people are like early on, in one of my very first virtual coffee meetings, someone was like, this was fine with me having a casual conversation like this, like we're peers, we were around the same age. But just so you know, if you ever meet a more senior professional, they're probably going to want you to have more structure to your first like cold message to them. Like make sure you let them know what kind of the itinerary is, what you're going to ask them, even put your questions heads up, like give them a heads up, just so that you don't waste their time. He was so kind. He was like, I didn't think you were wasting my time, but just so you know, it could be a bit more structured. And I was like, oh, damn. Like he told me you want to structure your conversation almost like an email to make it very kind of edited, make it quick to show respect for other people's time. And so I didn't really know anything about business culture and etiquette in that way. And people will try to help you. You just need to really like incorporate feedback and learn how to not kind of get defensive or like justify, oh, well, I'm only doing it like this. No, like if people are trying to give you a hint, just try to like integrate it. The other thing that I see now, I've done workshops with students in the political science department at Concordia and also at the University of Saskatchewan. There's an a practicing anthropology track to their master's program now. So I've spoken with the anthropology department at the U of S, which is also my alma mater. But there's sometimes students in these classes who say like I've or especially like PhD students that are very specialized. And in academia, you're encouraged to go like kind of full force with everything that you do. Like the more, the better. So these people are like, my master's or like my dissertation is so long and in depth, and I've been doing this for 12 years now. I've been in school, and it's the urge to kind of emphasize all of these things that are ultimately very niche. And also then like me or the professors would ask these students like, do you have a website, have you been on LinkedIn? And they're just like, no, I don't see why I have to do that because I'm so specialized, I'm like top of my class. But the thing is that when you go into the industry, um, there's different things that are being rewarded than you're used to in academia, and it's really counterintuitive, but kind of less is more when you're talking about your work in the industry. People like it's like the 30-second elevator pitch or concepts like that really work. And it's also a big skill is like to change that perspective from like how in depth can I go, kind of to like what is the right amount of information needed for this specific, conversation or this project. It's like I've heard it called right sizing, but I think of it as like calibrating. And people in academia, I feel like it's easy to think that this means watering down your work or having less integrity to your research or your methods, but that is not the case. The goal is to have your research framework and scope appropriate for things like the time frame you want to get answers within or the budget that you're working with without compromising the integrity of that research study. Um, and so having that right attitude, I find, is really important. It's kind of like a very drastic change in attitude. And yeah, just going through the motions of making your LinkedIn, get the website done, and it doesn't have to be perfect. But I think the biggest thing that will waste time for people is like having a bad attitude. I hate to say, but I've just seen it a lot of the time that people are like, I've tried everything. I've tried reaching out. Well, have you networked? No. Like, how would I even do that? I just talk to people. It's like, yes, you don't need to do anything special, but you got to put yourself out there. And one of these students was like, "Well, I don't know why I should do that. I'm a renowned scholar and they should know about my work." And it's like no one owes you a job, but you got to get the ball rolling yourself and put yourself out there. And so I think sometimes having like it's very humbling. It's kind of like an ego death from what you're used to being a postdoctoral researcher, like at the top of your game, to going down and like starting at an entry level. But you gotta you gotta kind of humble yourself a bit, and just that's kind of where everyone has to start. Or even if you find a senior position, if it's your first position, there's a learning curve, and everyone knows that in the industry as well. Um, Are there any questions that I missed, I wonder, in the chat?
I was gonna say, I think
Oh,
the chat's all over the place.
yeah, it's all over the place. I did want to get back to someone in the chat speaking about AI and project management, only because I have a story. I have a tale for everyone to consider about using AI as project managers. What not to do is to delegate work to your team, just copy paste from Chat GPT. That does not land well. Like, and so part of the thing with like harnessing the power of AI in your work, I think it's easy to kind of conflate that with just using AI, period, point blank. But it's obviously way more nuanced than that. There's a time and place to use AI. Anyone can put a prompt into AI and get the results. So as a project manager, your job is to understand like the top down directives of the team, your context in the framework of the fiscal year, like what your big broad goals are, and then get input from the researchers, from the designers, the developers, see how they're on track, and plan for the next sprint, which could be just like a 3-week time period coming up. So I've had um, managers in the past just take, our top-down directives, put it into Chat GPT, and like do a copy paste. And so we're getting 12 pages of ideas of what we could possibly work on. That's not the job for a project manager to do, because I could do that as well without a project manager. So it takes a human, emotional, intelligent being to prioritize and kind of navigate the interpersonal dynamics of a team, everyone's characters, strengths. Maybe someone's got a sick kid at home and they can't take on too much this week. There's a lot to say about the soft skills that we as humans bring to the table, let alone people with anthropological training. So there's definitely a time and place for AI. And I don't know anyone who's excited to be like delegated work by AI. But can we delegate work for AI to be done? I think there's like a lot of helpful things it can provide. Like I use it as a researcher writing reports, but for project management, I mean, that's outside of my wheelhouse, but just don't do that if you're going into project management. So I think I'm around at 10 minutes now for my talk. Are there any questions from people about what I just spoke on?
Yeah, one of the things that would be great if you could talk about is how you translated your skills to employers.
Yeah. So when I was working on my master's, so my research was on social media and well-being. I did a lot of like critical research and applying theory to surveillance capitalism and subjectivities of, well-being. I come from medical anthropology, and so my research was it was essentially like you could kind of frame it as user research because I was interviewing people about their use of Snapchat and Facebook to get at these critical angles. But when I graduated and heard about UX research, I just framed it as if I did exploratory, like generative research on social media with 14 participants, including diary studies. You should really lean into methodologies as well if you're wanting to talk about your research from your master's or from your PhD. I think I've learned one of the big assets that anthropologists have in the industry is that we have this toolbox coming out of school of all of our research methodologies. We know how to apply different frameworks. We know when to pair like a survey with a qualitative study or do like a narrative analysis versus other kinds of analyses. So I think it's really good if you're going to lean into something about your work, make it less wordy, but do talk about why you used, what methodology you used, and what framework you applied, and what the outcome was of that, and what any takeaways might be. Kind of use the STAR method. So it's like, what is it? Scenario. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher this. So it's like scenario,
I'll put it in the
task,
chat.
the actions. Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Um, and the results, and then maybe a takeaway. So there's a star and then a start. I found that very helpful. And I also really leaned into networking on LinkedIn. I even bought the LinkedIn Pro so that I could cold call people or just cold, like send out those messages. I thought it was a pretty good investment at the time, even though it's so expensive, but you really just need to spam people in an ethical way. But and make them all like don't just copy paste messages. I mean, create tailored intentional messages to people that you think you could look up to or that your trajectory might be the same on LinkedIn, kind of send those messages out. Specifically to individuals to get the coffee chats and start putting your feelers out there. And that's how I got my first two jobs. I've had a researcher drop out from a design agency, Handsome, who was working with 7-Eleven. And the person that I did like a coffee chat with kind of 3 weeks earlier was like, I know you're an anthropologist. Do you want to do like a month-long ethnography for 7-Eleven with us? You need to fly to Denver. I was working at Home Depot at the time, or no, Home Hardware, because I was in like a stretch of unemployment after graduation. And I was like, sure. And they're like, you need to buy a flight on Thursday to Denver and we'll pick you up. And I was like, okay. So I had to quit my job and like fly to Denver in like 3 days, basically, which felt like a kind of a big risk, obviously, but it's got a cat sitter and you got to kind of take chances to do that. But yeah, sometimes things work out like that. Other ways to tailor my self. I think, a big change that I did, maybe it's obvious, but don't put your education at the top of your resume. I don't think people do that in the industry world, but it's like a very obvious thing to do in the academia too, because you want to show people how qualified you are in university world. But yeah, flip that around. Like Jennifer was saying, people just look at the top for your job experience and write your job experience in the STAR method, and then put your education on the second page of your resume. And if people want to know, they'll find it. But usually that's not the most important information for finding work in the industry. And one last thing is I have found living in Vancouver that there's a lot of design boot camp. So I'm in the design research and design industry for digital products. And there's a lot of UX design boot camps, and they're like $10,000, become a designer now. The problem with these is there's often a cohort of like 40 people graduating from this class that like often doesn't give you a real world experience, but it gives you a case study that you can show in your portfolio, which is good. But now suddenly it's like November and there's 40 of you all applying to jobs at the same time. So there was kind of moments like that in Vancouver where there was just like a big wave of graduates kind of reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and I can kind of tell that like a boot camp just finished. So I was always on the fence about doing one of those. I found something similar. It's the service design course with U of T, which is a really great university in Canada. Um, it's the first university service design certificate that you can get in Canada. So I think that's a very reputable university kind of quick professional development course that you can get. And it's also just really enriching, like on a personal level. It's not just something to put on your resume, but I think it really helps prepare people for the field. So I would say find a balance like that. Kind of often the flashy like boot camps don't always bring anything more to the table than a regular professional development course, or even the courses on LinkedIn that also come with like if you pay for a LinkedIn membership, you get access to all of their LinkedIn learnings, which again, it's not like the flashiest thing to have on your resume, but at the end of the day, you just want to be able to kind of walk the walk. Once you say you know how to do these research things, you want to be able to transition well into the industry. And I think these courses just give you really practical understanding of what to expect, if not just another good bump up on your LinkedIn page. So I think, yeah, I think there are some gaps that these courses would just help you with, on like a personal level. So are there any questions about that, or should I hand it back off to Jennifer and Matt?
Actually, Natalie will take it.
I think Natalie has signed out now. She had to go.
Why
Yes.
don't we take a few questions for Kat because Kat's going to have to leave us in about 15 minutes. So how about if there are any questions directly for Kat and her content, and then we'll come back to Matt and Jennifer. Is that okay? Questions for Kat. Thank you for the ground truthing, Kat. That was very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to see so many people in an event like this from around the world.
Pamela, questions for Kat from the chat.
I'm not seeing any specifically for her. They're mostly more general, I think. We have one here that says some of the strategies to build a portfolio as an independent consultant. I heard this person is in India and they hardly ever see jobs that are seeking anthropologists, which we did discuss a little bit earlier. Do you have any comments on that?
I would just apply to them anyway. If you fit the qualifications, like Matt said, 80%, if it's a fit, then it doesn't necessarily matter what the title is. I don't
Right.
think I've ever seen a job unless it was for like a Google employee and they want an anthropologist and it's something really, really like senior and specialized. If it's something for, there could be like industrial design or like systems engineering, but there's all kinds of different terms. I would direct people also to Jennifer's links in the chat. Like I have all of those saved because people ask me
Right.
these questions all the time and I've never seen it laid out so nicely. So those are great resources to have to see like the career or like the job description, the job title, and the like skill set that goes along with it. But yeah, I was looking for UX research positions. And it's kind of hard to parse sometimes because people put an ad up for UX designers and they're like, you need to know how to recruit participants, to frame a research study, to write a report to stakeholders, to talk to people to see what the problem is they want the research done on. And I'm like, that's obviously a research job, not a design job, but I consider myself a designer too. I just don't do the graphic design stuff in Figma, but I work with that. I work with computer developers. I'm not a computer developer either. I don't know a lot of that technical side of things, but yeah, I think this is where informational interviews really become helpful. You start to learn the jargon and kind of see yourself in this culture of work a little bit better. There's a lot of things to know depending on what path you want to go down into the work.
Okay, so I've been looking through the questions here, and I just wanted to say in the beginning for the first hour or so, most of them have been answered online, but I would like to make sure that those who had their questions asked and answered online, if you have any follow-ups, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm going back now through the questions that haven't been answered. That was one of them. Another one was,
I have a
are there
question from Mia.
pardon? Where?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm sorry I missed.
Oh, there was just one in the chat. Can you speak to the recent downturn and loss of UX research roles due to AI and corporate layoffs and strategies to land a role in this environment? I've gotten into arguments about this. I feel very lucky to have a job in my field as an anthropologist. And I was working at Meta actually when they did that big layoff of like 11,000 people. I think it was like 2023. And that's kind of when the downturn started. I think I got hired like at peak like UX bubble and then the layoffs started happening. But I I mean, it's all about differentiating yourself. I don't think it's hard to differentiate yourself from AI exactly as a qualitative researcher. It's not going to be doing that. So that's not to say like there's a lot of people kind of disenfranchising. I don't know if that's the right word, but like there's a lot of people trying to like discredit the value of qualitative research. And the best we can do is kind of lean into why it's so important. It provides all of the context for quantitative research. You're not going to be doing a big study if you don't know what variables you're looking at, and you kind of get those from grounded qualitative research. So it's a very good pairing. It brings a lot of value to do mixed methods research and industry work. But yeah, it's important to, I don't know, I guess read more about how to use AI and see really what the limitations are there because there are a lot. Like I don't think people are necessarily going to give valuable feedback to like an AI interviewer. I've honestly had like more frustrating moments than not trying to use AI in my qualitative research. But what I do use AI for is parsing information from really long reports and putting them into different types of frameworks for a different audience. And then obviously doing all of that writing and editing and massaging things into place myself. But yeah, it's a shame. I think it's happening everywhere. It's very widespread that like the humanities, philosophy, research, like qualitative soft skills are being underappreciated, undervalued, so much so that I think people like I'm already seeing like an uptick on people being like computer programming degrees aren't going to get you jobs anymore. Like it's kind of come full circle again where there's just a big wave of technicians and people doing things that AI can do. I don't think anthropology is one of them, though, but it's all about finding that niche and really highlighting like the value that the soft interpersonal skills bring to the job.
So thank you for that. We are still getting some more questions, new ones. As I said before, if you have a question from earlier, please raise your hand or retype it if you want to go back to it. But somebody is asking whether anyone has insights on whether getting a PhD has helped them in industry.
I don't have a PhD,
Neither do
but I
I.
know, yeah,
I think it really depends on the industry,
it doesn't
whether
get
a
you a
PhD
job
matters.
faster.
Yeah, I would say there's some federal jobs out there where having a PhD I think is going to help you get fast tracked into some of those higher grades here in the United States. Also, I would say that there are certain fields where you have a lot of crossover with higher ed. I'm thinking philanthropy, where a PhD I think is going to get a lot more recognition and respect. But I would say there's other jobs where if you're applying with a PhD, there's some times where you might be better off leaving it off because they're going to look at it and they're like, oh, she's going to be expensive. She's going to, probably leave us at some point. And unfortunately, that's a reality in certain types of industries.
And if you're looking for a job right now, don't start a PhD because it's going to be like 7 years later. You're going to be looking for work, I guess. I was at that crossroad as well. I'm like, I have one window where I'm graduated from my master's. Should I apply to industry work now or start a PhD? But I'm glad that I applied and have industry experience, and you can go back and do a PhD like whenever you want.
I'll add, though, if you want to be a forensic anthropologist, you do need a PhD, but also remember there's not a lot of jobs in that space, unless you're ready to be a coroner for some random county.
So I think there was one question in this area, the UX area, that was not answered online. It says, I was just what this person explains that they are transitioning into that. I was just wondering in the Balkans, where UXR is not a very developed field, how could I enter the space, especially coming from an anthro background, how to present my skills and abilities and what I offer to them? Is that something that would be that you could answer, Kat? Or do you have a response, I should say, not answer? I
Sorry,
realize
I was just trying to find that question too, but I
it's
saw
it's at
something
1:40,
similar.
an hour and 48 minutes.
We have two hands up.
And we do, I see one hand up. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing more than one.
Charlie Hodges. Oh, I see.
We'll come back to you, Charlie.
I think I can comment on the UX piece for the
hmm.
Balkans is okay, if there's not much demand or interest in that in your area, I think you're going to have to try and work internationally if you're wanting to use that skill set. Um, now, one thing I do want to flag that when it comes to UX is, yeah, this industry really has been flooded by all those camps that Kat mentioned. And also, when it comes to a lot of corporate entities, research is the first thing to go. And I think AI has aggravated that. Where I've seen a lot of folks working in UX switching over is into service design. So, really, like, what is more the experience of the customer? So, it's a little less about the computer interface and a little more about the customer experience. That's one space you could look at. So there's a lot of like terms there. There's CX, voice of the customer is another one, or process design, service design are some of the keywords there. And I would also point out that process improvement is another area too where a lot of those skills translate over.
So
Um,
I'm sorry, anything else?
I was just gonna maybe tack on to that. Or oh no, this is a different one about medical anthropology, but
Yeah.
yeah, often the job titles don't line up with academic like titles of what discipline you're in. So there aren't like medical anthropology research roles per se, but sometimes like nonprofits or work in the healthcare do list like academic backgrounds as like, medical anthropology would be an asset. But yeah, I would also agree with Kathleen, like find people on LinkedIn who have that as their academic background as well and see what jobs they have now. Charlie, do you have a question
Oh,
still?
yeah, Charlie has a question. Sorry.
Hey, sorry, I was just wondering that I know that like applied anthropology and specific fields of anthropology, it feels so niche and looking for specific jobs to that we can apply our training and academic background to. It's difficult. Everyone's looking in, every corner of the internet to find where they can fit in. And I feel like I don't know if it's probably not just me, but like burnout is like a real thing that experiencing when you're like going through the job market for months. And I feel like looking back at my cover letters from like 3, 4 months ago, they were like really good. And now the ones that I'm putting out now I feel like it's like taking a hit based on like burnout. So do you have any advice for that?
Ah,
Okay.
yeah. Go
Um,
ahead, Matt.
so, and Jennifer already knows this. My feeling on cover letters, and this is going to be specific to your industry, but I have not done a cover letter in like 12 years.
Oh,
It
yeah.
really depends on the sector that you're going into. Um, if the sector that or if you have something to explain, if you are switching industries, or if there's a large gap in your resume, something like that. If you have something to explain, that is a good use case for a cover letter. Otherwise, if it's not necessary for your industry, I just don't do them.
I have to agree with that. I was always leaning towards not writing a cover letter unless it was something that specifically requested it. Like you could tell a manager wrote this job description out and said, email me, here's my letter with this and your cover letter. Then I'm like, okay, they need it for some reason. And then I try to make a really good one. But if it's not specified and it's like, and there's no manager email, it's just like an ad on LinkedIn to put up, I would say prioritize your resume and just make it really tight and to the point. And that seemed like it was enough for me, but now yeah, it's been a while. Oh, I also, Navneet, just to answer your question from earlier about working in and applying to the federal government positions, I think I saw my job posting on LinkedIn, and it was one of the types where the manager wrote it out, obviously, and had an email there. Initially, it said that you have to be bilingual with French and English, and I just applied anyway, because what's the worst that can happen? They say, no, sorry, you're not, like, I'm not bilingual. So, but I applied anyway because I wanted to introduce myself and ultimately, like, kind of knew they would reject me for this. It seemed like a pretty firm requirement, but I just wanted to tell them if they did get back to me that if you ever have a position that isn't requiring bilingual skills, just like let me know. This is kind of like my dream job. And yeah, she was like, yeah, no, for this one, we do need bilingual, but I'll let you know. Like we like the look of your resume, think you would be a good fit. So I know it's a huge problem, the AI on the recruiting side of things, and people even writing their resumes with AI that frustrate recruiters. So there's just too many robot things happening on both sides. And I think at the end of the day, both people appreciate when someone takes the time or tries to get a hold of like a human person to have that one-on-one conversation. But that worked out in my favor in this case. And like I think it was like 3 weeks later, they said that there was a new position. They're growing their research team and they don't need a bilingual person for this one. And if I wanted to apply, send it all in. And then it's like a 6 month process of getting all of the security clearances and police background checks and stuff. And in that time, the job could fizzle up if there's like an election and they decide to cancel it. But that also didn't happen this time, luckily. So that's how I got this job with the federal government. But there's a lot of different ways. A question on whether published research and authorship help strengthen the chances for industry jobs? I think so. I mean, it can't hurt. I think it's important to present your publications in that STAR method, though, to keep things really consistent on your resume and make it an easy read. Like you can write, oh, I did that. Like for me, I have a publication for like a longitudinal study I did for the education company that we did. I worked for a nursing education company, and we ended up peer review publishing our research after I did it with them. And I just put in like, while I worked for this company, my job title was lead researcher. We worked on like longitudinal research that kind of was boiling down their service offerings, which were education courses, and trying to understand the gaps of opportunity areas where they should lean into to fill the gap between nursing school and when nurses find a job. That's the kind of education company they were. So like in the section where it's like what were the outcomes, or like what did you deliver for this job, I just wrote it resulted in a peer reviewed publication in this journal. And you have to go like from job like the perspective of your role on that job first, and then the publication as a result. I wouldn't talk about like your thesis in the article or anything like that necessarily.
I'm recognizing that Kat is over time.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I hope to stay in touch with anyone if you want to reach out to me. And Jennifer and Matt, I would love to stay in touch with you guys as well. Thanks so much for the resources and sharing.
Okay. So thanks, Kat. Take good care. What we're going to do, because we had a lot of people who came in later, what we want to do is come back around to Matt and Jennifer and ask them to do a bit again on resume building and job outreach. And I want to remind everybody that the video will be on the GAP website in about a week. So anything that was missed at the front, you can pick up on the video. So if everybody's good with that, I don't see another question that's burning at the moment. We'll go back to Matt and Jennifer. Thanks.
All right. So yeah, if you missed my introduction, I'm Jennifer Studebaker. I'm a business anthropologist. I'm located in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm currently employed as the executive director of the Women Food and Agriculture Network, which is a nonprofit based here in the United States. I'll let Matt introduce himself briefly, and then we'll get more into the actual resume piece.
I'm Matt Stouffer. I am a federal government contractor in the DC area. I'm currently supporting a contract as a data scientist, but I've worked in banking, anti-money laundering, threat finance, cybersecurity. I think that's it. Yeah. So
Nice.
Jennifer, take it away.
All right, yeah, and I'll add, I've moved back and forth between the for-profit, nonprofit sectors, usually working in a mix of research and administrative or operational type roles. What makes an effective resume? I think the biggest thing to recognize, and I was going to comment on this based on some of the questions in the chat, is when you're putting together your resume, this is not just about you. This is about you in relation to the organization you're trying to get a job with. So when you're speaking to employers, they don't care just what can you do. They care about how does what you can do help them. So it's really important to sit down and do some reflexivity. So one of the first things I was going to share in the chat, and for those of you who've been on here the whole time, you've probably already seen this one, is I think before you even start writing your resume is to just do a little reflexivity and think about what are your skills. So I'm dropping a tool in here that'll help you kind of audit your skills and gauge your level of confidence. And one of the things to think about as you're doing this exercise is recognize what skills do you think you're actually going to need for that area that you're wanting to go work in. I don't have the link on this one handy. But I recommend checking out the Career Path series that the Anthropology Career Readiness Network did with AAN last year. It's available on their YouTube. There's 6 different parts, but one of the parts in there was for my colleague Ryle Nolan around exploring domains of practice. So when you're getting ready to get into a particular sector, I really recommend that you do a little reflection on like, what are your values? What's important to you? What type of work do you want to do? Because that's kind of the important first step. As Ryle notes, like your values and what you care about hopefully isn't the thing that's going to change. Your skills can change, but what you value and is important to you in a workplace is usually pretty consistent. So doing that reflexivity and understanding where you want to go is going to be the first step. Then, when you're getting ready to start on your resume, it's important to think about what the language those employers are using. So when you go read a job description, look at the keywords that they're using in describing those skills. So I'm going to drop another tool in the chat that you may have seen come through around translating anthropology terms into language that employers are more likely to recognize. Just because we do have a lot of our own jargon, when you search for jobs, if you're somebody who really wants to go into research, you're probably going to get more hits on social science than you are going to get on anthropology when you're trying to find those types of jobs. So it's important to know what the keywords are being used in those different sectors. I would also add to think about what are your own requirements when it comes to a workplace too, as you're looking at jobs, because there may be different constraints for you. You may need something that's remote. You might be looking for something that's in office. I've known some people where they're like, I just got to be around other people or I'm going to have a really bad time. So it's important to know what you're looking for when you're applying to those jobs, and that's going to help you stand out. So if it's an in-person office job and that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of other people, but you're into it, that might actually get you in to the job. Also, coming back to resume piece, I've got this one here. A lot of us in academia are taught how to put together a CV. So it stands for curriculum vitae. And this is really a list of all your experience. So your education, every presentation you've made, employers, depending on the job. Now, if you're applying for jobs where there's going to be a lot of people who came from academia and it's a specifically highly research focused job, a CV might be what they're asking for. But in most job applications, they're looking for a resume. So a resume is usually 1 to 2 pages max. Don't go over that. And it really is reflecting your experience in relation to that job description. So I'm going to drop another tool here in the chat around how to analyze job descriptions. So when you're putting together your resume, as I noted before, the first thing you want to do is make it easy to like. So I think Matt and we did a resume workshop last week at SFA, and one of the exercises we had was flashing your resume on the screen in front of everybody for 6 seconds and moving on. And like, that's how much time you're usually going to get. There may be some folks who are a little more generous like myself, where, I work for a small nonprofit and we're in the ag industry, so we're a little anti-AI. So I made a promise to everybody that applied to my jobs that I would read their applications, but I'm probably an exception there. So you're going to want to put the most relevant information up at the top of your resume and make it easy for them to scan and skim and see how your experience relates to the job that they're hiring for. Next, there's some common mistakes to be avoided. I didn't actually mention this earlier, but when it comes to the ATS systems, there's a lot of conflicting information out there. I will add, don't pay anybody to scan your resume either. I think there's just follow the best practices, but you usually want to keep most of your information in a 1 column rather than 2 columns if it's going to be scanned by potentially by a computer. And yeah, try and keep it well organized. Basic mistakes are not spelling things correctly. So that's always a quick toss. Also, if you got some wonky formatting, if it's a marketing job, straight in the trash. I'm sorry, that is something that's going to get you disqualified pretty quickly. Also, not including your contact information. So I grown every time I get a resume that doesn't have the person's email on it, because you cannot assume that the person you're emailing that resume to is going to be the only person looking at it and that might want to reach out to you. So make it easy for them to get in touch with you, see that you're a good fit for that job, and follow up. Also, we generally advise against including a photo. So unless you're trying to get a modeling job, it's usually not something recommended to include. I know Canva in their little templates will sometimes have that included, but ignore it, delete it, don't put it in there. Also, another thing to avoid is just listing the duties that you had in the job. So instead of being like, I manage the day-to-day bookkeeping of this organization, you want to think about what did you achieve? What are kind of the impact that you've had in that workplace? So as Kat mentioned earlier, using that STAR method where you're thinking about, okay, what was the situation? What did I need to do? And what was like the outcome of the work that we did together? And the other kind of note I have before I pass it back to Matt is really use your anthropology skills to try and understand your audience, because it's going to vary between different workplaces. So, as we said before, if you're submitting your resume and your application materials through a portal you need to log into, or you can see Workday up at the top, you can assume that there's going to be an ATS system. So it's an applicant tracking system scanning that, looking for keywords, versus a lot of times with smaller, mom and pop shops, thinking about consultancies or nonprofits like myself, you're going to be emailing a mailing address, an inbox. So you're going to have human eyes on your stuff first, and you can have a little more creativity, I think, in terms of the design of your format, of your resume format. All right, so I'll toss it back over to Matt real quick.
So just to go over real quick what we mentioned previously. In my opinion, it's always better to be doing anthropology rather than being an anthropologist. Focus on anthropology as a skill set rather than an identity. It allows you to batch together different kinds of skill sets that help you play in different arenas. So yeah, focus on doing anthropology rather than being an anthropologist. There are many, many job titles or many, many job descriptions that anthropologists can work in. Don't limit yourself. For example, I mentioned that I worked in cybersecurity. Technical fields like cybersecurity, it's not something that anthropologists usually think of, but there's a particular role called an information security systems engineer, an ISSE. That is a role that requires a lot of interpersonal skills, and generally speaking, technical people often kind of lack that. So it's a perfect opportunity for anthropologists to diversify their skill set, pick up additional domain knowledge, and work in contexts that are not as familiar to anthropologists. Let's see. Be discoverable. Make sure that you have a presence on LinkedIn and other job databases like that. There are sometimes there's sometimes job databases that are kind of specific to your industry. So, for example, as a federal contractor with security clearance, I use a few databases. One of them in particular is called Clearance Jobs. It's specifically designed for people that have security clearance. So it's a good way to get your resume out to recruiters because they troll that site all the time. The more you are discoverable, the more the recruiters will reach out to you for the skill set that you have, and that's a better position to be in, rather than trying to knock on a closed door and apply to positions that, especially if a job description was posted, a month ago, odds are that job description has had hundreds, if not thousands, of applications sent against it. So you likely won't ever get your resume looked at in a situation like that. It's better for them to start coming to you. Let's see. I always mention this at these kinds of at this kind of forum. I've done the Napa Careers Expo for the last few years, and in that situation, more than a few times, people have when I mention that I work in national security spaces or that I've worked in fintech or that I've worked in banking, people will say, "Oh, that's scary," and they will walk away. We need to be in scary places. Anthropologists have a very valuable perspective, and the more that we can get into those spaces, the the more they benefit from our perspectives. When we're not there, those spaces get worse. So be brave, be courageous. And also be strategic. Again, I tell this story a lot. Um, I went to an event where someone was she had written a book about her career and did an event to discuss that her career and that book. And she mentioned that her career was more of a careen. Don't do that. Have a plan. Be strategic about your career. You can deviate from the plan. That's no problem. I've deviated from my own plans many times. But have a plan. At least have a trajectory that you want to go. Uh, let's see. And then just talking a little bit more about the ATS system, applicant tracking system. Um, we think that something like 98% of companies are using these. So it really does behoove you to keep that in mind. I think I mentioned in the chat, a friend of mine, she had been trying to get a job for months, and then she put her resume through ChatGPT or some other Gen AI, and basically said, "Make my resume ATS compliant." After she did that, she got a job almost immediately. So that's anecdotal, but yeah, if you're having trouble even getting traction, even getting interviews, that may be a strategy that you can use.
Yeah, the other resource I'll flag too is especially if you're somebody who just graduated, say, with your bachelor's degree and you're having a really hard time thinking, like, what do I do? Is don't sleep on staffing agencies. So these are companies that's their job to find people to fill roles. So they'll take the time to look over your resume and give you suggestions on what to change, and they get paid for getting you a job. So they're incentivized to get you placed. And there are some bigger national or international ones out there, like Insight Global, Morgan Hunter. Those are a couple just off the top of my head. But I'll also say that there's a lot of local staffing agencies, depending on where you live, that focus on specific industries. So, for example, here in Kansas City, I actually got my job at the Kauffman Foundation through Chief of Staff Casey. They hired me for a public affairs coordinator role. So there's a lot of bigger organizations out there, especially for more administrative coordinator type roles, or receptionists, or even like accounting and those types of skills, where they're going to be prioritizing working with staffing agencies because it's an extra layer of sort of screening for them. And you can also backdoor your way into some harder places to get into. So, for example, if you're applying for a job at the Kauffman Foundation now, for, say, an impact officer role, I think you could expect to have at least 4 interviews over the course of several months. If you're lucky, it might be closer to 6 or 7. Whereas I got into the Kauffman Foundation, where I worked for 5 years, with a 30-minute interview and started the next week, coming in through a staffing agency. And the other benefit to staffing agencies, as a lot of times they're attempt to hire roles. So you're going to be working for, say 1 to 3 months as a temp before they would consider hiring you full time. And the benefit there is you get to kind of feel the organization out too before you commit. And if you don't want to stay, you can also ask them to help you find another position. So this is a really great way to kind of, if you're new and you're not really sure what you like, where you want to go, it's a way to feel out and get experience in different sectors. And also if you're trying to get into a new space, staffing agencies can also help. A Creative Circle is another one too that I think sometimes has UX roles, and is more focused on the creative industries. All right. Okay, so I see, Elise, you've got a question in the chat to make it clear. So when writing your resume, instead of listing responsibilities, apply the STAR method and describing the role. So, for example, instead of saying it was my job to assist my supervisor in doing the departmental budgeting, it's much more impressive to say that, I collaborated with the team to streamline our $10 million budget process, resulting in a significant decrease in reclasses. It's a way of showing impact. So it's really about how did you use that skill, or how did you do your work that benefits the organization. So another one would be like, I conducted a research study around, the CRM adoption and developed a training that increased, use of the tool by X percent. So looking at ways to include those sort of action words, numbers. So thinking amounts of money as well as percentages of increases or decreases. And how did you solve a problem? I think that's one of the things that with ACRN we've emphasized for anthropologists. We're problem solvers. We have the toolkit to like make things work better, make people's lives easier. So if you can find a way to demonstrate that, that's really important.
So we have one more. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, for an example of doing ethnography on the job, informally doing ethnography on the job. One of my first positions outside of, after completing the master's, I, to your point about temp agencies, I took a job with a temp agency, where they placed me at a large financial institution. My degrees were in biology and anthropology. I didn't have any business in banking, but we had a group of subject matter experts, and all the other temps were afraid to ask them questions because they're scary people in suits. So I became the interlocutor. I became the person that was asking questions to the experts and then relaying that knowledge back to the temps. And because of that, I became this kind of funnel for knowledge, and I learned everything that I know about anti-money laundering on the job. So that's a way that you can use anthropology, a way that you can use ethnography on the job.
Also, I'll add the few times I've gotten to do research at work, it was because I was listening. I was usually hired to do something else. And then I hear a boss complain, I just don't understand why da 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 does this. And then you can go, I can help you with that. And, depending on the workplace and how good your pitch is, you might get to start working on it the next week. You may still have to do your other duties too, though. So just remember that.
Okay, a couple of questions that haven't been answered so far. Have been addressed directly, I don't think. Does anyone have any experience with approaching NGOs that have not posted research jobs but have conducted research in the past that they're aware of? Is this approach worth my time? And then the other question, and just getting them in here quickly, is someone is looking for guidance on how to find online jobs while they're doing their research, their studies, because they're in self-finance. So they would like to have some ideas on how to find, I assume what they mean by online jobs is remote jobs that they could do while they're studying.
Yeah, I think Kathleen could probably answer a little on the NGO one, but my first note would be if they've done research in the past, I would look at those reports and see if they did that research in-house or if they hired outside consultants. And then you might want to reach out to those outside consultants to get to know them. Because one of the things that I got advice when I started my own consulting firm, and I've shifted more into like a full-time role because, I guess I foster failed on my first client. Is that oh gosh, I just blanked. When it comes to consulting, a lot of times you're going to need to partner up with other people. So the advice I got when I first started my business was to have a business partner. I was like, oh, I don't want to have like a legal relationship with somebody. But I realized later what he meant was that you need to have people that think of including you on their bids. So you want to have partners and people you trust and you work well together, that when they're applying to an RFP, so it's a request for proposals for a research job, they're like, okay, I'm gonna slot Jennifer in as my survey person, because it's usually more of a team effort. So that's where I would go if you're trying to get into that research space, is getting to know the consultants working in that space and show your value and the skills that you have, so that you might first get brought on as more of like a coordinator role, you might not to get to be full-blown lead researcher to start. I think that's always a thing to remember. Sometimes you got to put in the time before you get in those leadership roles. But yeah, I'll pass it over to others if they want to add more.
I agree with Jennifer. Look at what the organization has done in the past. They may not be thinking about what they've done as research. They may have had a report to a funder. Read those. If you're really interested in a particular organization, read the reports and think about how you could bring value, how you could improve them without criticizing what they've done. You can say, this is wonderful. And we know that funders are looking for harder objectives now. Here's how you could translate this, add to it, upgrade it. In terms of finding jobs as anthropologists, we tend to be sensitive when we talk about money, except we need to bring it in. Follow the money. If you want a government grant or you want to work in a particular area of health and human services, who's getting the funding to do that? Follow the funding and you'll find the jobs. You can swim upstream or down. But if you get in that pathway, you're going to see who's doing that work and who could be a potential employer. NGOs really frequently don't think of themselves as doing research, but more and more they're being pressed to do monitoring and evaluation. So we, 20 years ago, became monitoring and evaluation people by gaining new skills and then focusing our experience and our tools into monitoring and evaluation, bringing added value as anthropologists. Think about being flexible. Think about how contextual you can be, how universal your skills can be and be valuable to an employer, to an agency, to a governmental group.
Okay, so we have one other question that sort of goes back a few minutes to the question of staffing agencies, headhunters as they call. Does anybody have the names of any staffing agencies that where anthropologists are successful?
I don't think it's exclusively anthropologists. I think it's really about the sector that you're wanting to get into. I think Matt told me he gets bugged by them all the time. Insight Global might be a good one to start with.
They won't leave me alone. God.
Yeah. But there's also ones that are very like specific to certain types of jobs too. So another one that I think I shared with our in my follow-up email for our resume workshop is Talent Citizen. And this one is really more focused on like philanthropy type roles and different leadership roles in higher ed. That's another thing too to think about is, higher ed still is an employer. You just might not be a professor. That's always an option too, if you're having, if that's a space you want to stay in as well. Yeah, but it's really specific. And I'll come back. I saw there was an earlier question too about consultancies. There's a ton of consultancies. I would say, Kathleen, you are honored by the presence of the first anthropological consultancy, I would say, with Kathleen here on the call and LTG Associates. Red Associates is another one you may be familiar with. I know Stripe Partners, Space Doctors are a few that have started more recently. But there's not a lot of just anthropology or just ethnography consultancies out there. A lot of them are working in more specific industries. So, specializing in urban planning, and having an anthropologist in urban planning is really important when you're trying to do community feedback work, or evaluation is another huge area. So it's really more industry specific.
Okay, so I have tried to find all the questions that haven't been answered yet. I hope I found them all. But if there's anything that anybody would like to go back to, please go ahead and raise your hand. Or if you have any new questions, we'll try to catch up
We're
in the
going
chat.
to take just a couple questions. We've had I know that this has been a little disjointed this morning because of the time zone issue, but it's all good. We're flexible. We're anthropologists, right? So we're going to take any burning questions, and then I have 1 minute of advice, and then Don's going to wrap us up and send us out the door. How's that sound?
The last question we have here, I don't know if it's burning, is any advice in finding internships? Anybody know anything about that?
Well, I also see you probably want paid internships too. So that's where, maybe identify which organizations out there offer internships. For example, the Kauffman Foundation has a cohort every summer, and follow them so that when you can see those announcements come out. And the other thing I'll add too is that paid internships, or like the internship cycle, usually starts like January for the summer. Though I will say with my organization, sometimes I do hire internships and it's much quicker turnaround. So I would say, go start following organizations and people that have internships. And there's also some organizations out there that help place internships. I'll think about it and I'll drop it in the chat. There's one that's specifically around environmental type work.
Thanks to Jennifer and Matt and Olivia and Kat and all of you. So 30 seconds of some uplift, I hope. I started out this session by saying, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't need an anthropologist. Anthropologists need to learn how to present themselves in ways that people can recognize the value. We need to train employers. So once we're inside, we need to say, and that was an anthropological difference. And that was anthropology that brought you this value. Despite the job market, anthropologists are getting jobs and being valued and having good careers. And I don't know anybody who went a straight line. So if you think zigzagging is making you queasy, you're just going to have to learn to flex with zigzagging, because that's how most anthropologists do their jobs. Join anthropology organizations. Most of them are free or very limited in their cost, and most of them have free resources that you can just tag onto and use. It's a warm network, so join us. And over to Don to wrap us up and take us out the door. Thanks all.
Thank you so much. Hope you can hear me. Hello and welcome. I'm in Slovenia and in Europe, and was last week in Albuquerque at another anthropology meeting organized by the Society for Applied Anthropology. I'm happy to see many familiar faces here too. And we actually had a very similar discussion there. The question was, anthropologists, will you keep your job in the age of AI? Because the AI has become seemingly a kind of threat to our jobs, to our future. But what we've realized at our session is we shouldn't be afraid neither of the AI nor of the future. The future and the AI are here, and we are those that can reshape the future. And in my opinion, thinking about the future, we shouldn't be just optimists thinking that the future is totally bright for anthropology, or pessimists that the future is very dark for anthropology. We should be active realists and do something about our future. It is up to us to decide how anthropologists will join the shaping of the AI, how we will use the new technological solutions, and how we will also keep changing the world without the digital solutions, because this is our duty too, to keep changing the world, hopefully for the better. And I think this session has showed that we can also bring together, though we had some time issues, two separate worlds, so America and Europe and many other people from India and elsewhere. So we don't have to live in separate realities. We can come together more often, perhaps also physically, to exchange new ideas and particularly to support one another. And another opportunity is in also organized in this October by our association, Applied Anthropology Network of the European Association of Social Anthropologists. So the event Why the World Needs Anthropologists will take place in October in Salamanca, in Spain, and we will keep this kind of discussions. Thematically, the event will be connected to emergency, because getting a job, this is an emergency for all of us. And I think we should just keep finding new ways how to support one another, how to present ourselves. And here, to conclude, I would like to remind us all, and also those who are AAN members, about our three postulates, about the three key ideas that we want to share at this kind of meetings. So we use three words deriving from anthropology, from the history of anthropology. And the first one is exogamy. So open up, connect with others. Don't stay closed just in the anthropological community. We should collaborate more with engineers, with medical doctors, with managers, with all sorts of people, and invite them to this kind of meetings. So in this way, we will also get new job opportunities. Second, Kula, so you know the Kula ring from the Trobriand Islands, researched by Malinowski. So Kula, rule number 2. So it's the Kula is about gift exchange. When you find out something new, important, also in job market, share it with others. Share it via social media, share it on LinkedIn, share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram. Or if you get any new interesting research ideas, share it with others immediately. The more you share, the more you get back. It's so simple. And the rule number 3, it's connected to this event, to Why the World Needs Anthropologists, to SFAA conferences, and all other events, anthropological events. It's the rule of potlatch, coming, from the northwest of Americas. And it's connected to presenting the things we do in the way that is acceptable to others, that is invigorating, that is inspiring. Let's make a big party out of this. I mean, the future is not sad. The future can be very bright, and we should also show and be proud of our achievements of anthropology. And we can do it at every event, actually, including this one. So with these 3 rules, so exogamy, Kula, and potlatch, I leave you wherever you are, on this side of Atlantic or the other side, or Pacific, or whichever ocean separates us. Thank you.
Thank you all. Be safe. Be good anthropologists. Come on out and join us all.